The 7 deadly sins are very well known. Maybe you first encountered them in Full Metal Alchemist, the horror movie Seven, or maybe in an actually religious context, but regardless, you probably are at least somewhat familiar. Their counterparts, the 7 heavenly virtues, are dramatically less famous. Hey everybody, it's LavenderTowne, and today I'm going to take these medieval concepts and try to make monster designs from them. But how will I turn concepts like charity and patience into monsters? Well, my friend, we all know the road to hell is paved with good intentions. We're starting with chastity, the virtue mirroring the deadly sin of lust. The idea of chastity being a virtue is definitely not just a Catholic one. In fact, almost all of the Abrahamic religions have restrictions on what believers are allowed to do together and when, usually having to do with marriage. Many religions also require that their workers, be they nuns, priests, or monks, are celibate for their entire lives. The word chaste and chastity come from the Latin word castus, which means separated or cut off. This was the first thread I wanted to weave into our monster design. Friar and philosopher Thomas Aquinas also connected the word castus to castigo, which means to chastise, reprimand, or correct. This is a little off topic, but Thomas Aquinas kept showing up in my research about all the virtues, and then I looked at his actual Wikipedia page, and this is the first time I've ever seen a note that basically said, this guy was a serial yapper. He has too many lengthy quotations, and you need to put more in the article other than just stuff that he said. I thought that was really funny. I'm also going to include some imagery of chastity belts, which traditionally were these scary metal contraptions with spikes on them that you would wear around like your hips and groin. I should say, a lot of the info we have about medieval chastity belts might be partially or completely fake. In fact, though some were displayed in museums in Nuremberg and London, a lot of them have now been removed as their authenticity is in question. I'm still including them because they absolutely were used in the 19th century, mainly as a supposedly medical device to prevent girls and women from engaging in unladylike behavior. There definitely were some examples of controlling and untrusting men forcing their wives to wear them during times apart, and the old style was actually pretty dangerous to wear so close to the body. Worn too long, they could cause infections, sepsis, and death. The stories of Catholic saints are also rife with possible inspiration for our monster designs. The best way to become a saint, after all, was to suffer a horrible death, so I'm also including some references to St. Agnes. She was a real 12 or 13-year-old girl who was beheaded for refusing to marry and wanting to stay celibate for her entire life. Her skull is actually still preserved, and the story described her having flames part below her feet when they tried to burn her at the stake, and her hair growing long to cover her body, and I included long flowing hair that almost looks like it's turning to flames around her. I think even though St. Agnes was born in 291, so many years ago, I think it still digs into the modern darkness of chastity as a virtue and how people can really take it too far. I think that protecting your life should be a higher priority than protecting your virtue, and I think sometimes these stories can almost kind of imply that it would be the honorable thing to do to just die and throw your life away as a woman or a girl, which I think is horrible. So yeah, that's the type of darkness I was kind of trying to lean into. I sort of wanted her to be this character who is very extreme, who would use her scissors to cut away at anything that she finds obscene, which is like almost everything. And she's definitely like physically the least monstrous looking, but I still think she's pretty creepy with her little bisected arms and the intensity of her stare. I imagine her staring forward until the whites of her eyes turn red, just sort of looking out for anything that she doesn't approve of. She's so obsessed with protecting innocence and purity that she uses her scissors to cut up books that she thinks are obscene. She's basically like this scary, omnipresent, always watching kind of character who will relentlessly and mercilessly attack anything she thinks is not clean. It only makes sense with the concept of this design that she would be an extremely guarded character, and that she might just stab you with her scissors if you're not up to her standards. If you guys have an idea for what we should call her, I'm bringing back the comment naming of these characters, and I actually have some names from a previous video that I will show in a second, but here is our final version of the chastity character. I tried not to go too dark with this, but this was definitely the darkest subject matter wise. I think she turned out really cool and kind of stoic, and if you have any ideas for names for her, please let me know. Let's talk about diligence. Diligence is the mirror virtue of sloth, and it is what it sounds like, more or less, working hard and committing yourself to your labors. Overwork is a real thing, and of course that's where we're going. He's wearing his fingers to bones and his eyes are red with exhaustion. He's also burning the candle at both ends. I made kind of a halo helmet hat thing out of burning candles, basically just alluding to this idiom about burning the candle at both ends. And the wax is like pouring over his face. He's being smothered by these long hours that he's working. I didn't want everyone to look like they were from the same time period, so I actually gave him kind of like a worn out businessman outfit. There's like a sweat stain around his neck, and I also made a yoke. A yoke is a very biblical way of thinking about labor. It's something you put around the neck of like an ox that's gonna pull your cart, and he has a yoke around his neck, representing his labors again, but I wanted to make it look a little like angel wings. I don't know how well I'm going to be able to pull this off, but we'll see. I really just wanted him to kind of look like he's happy, like he loves working, because that's what diligence, you're supposed to like really be committed to it and be happy for it. And I think that's kind of the vibe I'm trying to give off. I tried not to get too gory and nasty with his fingers while also clearly showing that, yeah, he's worn them down to literal bones. Never mind that his muscles are gone. We're not being anatomically correct here, we're just being creepy. And I really wanted him, I almost wanted him like holding his mouth open in this smile. It's almost this like customer service thing where you've been working so long on your shift and you still have to smile and act like you're happy to be a cashier or whatever. I remember when I used to work really long hours and it was really dark in the winter in Calgary, and I would just be so exhausted, like I could not make myself smile anymore. And I knew I wasn't giving the best customer service that I could at the bookstore, but I was just so tired. So that was something I was kind of trying to think about here. I wanted to keep the color palette pretty limited. I didn't want it to look too fun or exciting. So I really stuck with this like kind of buttery yellow candle wax, and then I wanted everything else to look sort of drab. I gave him like a wooden top of his yoke, and then there's that little bracket that goes around his neck. And I wanted the candles to sort of be lit kind of dramatically. I think that he looks pretty scary. There's something just so creepy about the way that he's staring past these drips of wax that are almost like smothering him. Overworking oneself is an easy way to turn this virtue into kind of a monster, and I imagine him hovering over your shoulder, whispering in your ear that you don't need a break. You can work even longer. The harder you try, the better things will turn out, and just driving you mad, forcing you to obsess over work until you have nothing left to give. You're completely exhausted. People can die from overworking, and it is a real concern, especially these days. I feel like with hustle culture and everything, people don't know when to take a break, and that can turn this virtue into a major problem. Have you ever heard that patience is a virtue? Well, it actually is. It's one of the 7 heavenly virtues, and this is one I was really dreading. I thought I was not going to be able to figure out a pathway to making this a monster, but I pretty quickly realized how patience can turn kind of evil and sinister, and that is the fact that sometimes enduring things that are unfair or painful is really a way to abandon yourself and harm yourself. And sometimes we encourage people to be patient and just take things when really what they need to do is advocate for themselves and demand better treatment. So that's basically the idea here. She has a mask of this happy, kind of contented person, and it's wrapping around her head, but behind it is this explosion of suffering and anger, and you can see the mask starting to slip even though it's clinging around her head in this very claustrophobic way. I also wanted to show, the lack of forward movement, the lack of progress that her patience is costing her. So on her body we see that moss is growing, there's like fungus growing on her because she's not moving. She's just standing there waiting for her situation to improve. I think that that is also an aspect of patience that could be kind of negative. Now, obviously, it's really good to be patient with people. We all benefit when we're patient with each other. But I do think that there are some scenarios where patience is just the wrong virtue to have, especially when other people need help. Trying to just be really peaceful and sweet all the time and never cause conflict can sometimes cause us to kind of sign on to, whoever's the loudest and most aggressive in the room. So many of the virtues are really about restraining yourself, whether it's your appetites, your desire to relax, your desire to express anger. And I found myself constantly wanting to draw sort of these restrictive kind of clothing pieces and things. In this case, I gave her almost this kind of Victorian cut with quite a tight-laced corset, and you also see there's cords around her waist. I was trying to kind of simulate that feeling of when, anger is rising in your gut, but you're holding it down. You're not showing that you're upset. You're not letting the people around you know that this is getting to you for whatever reason. I wanted it to kind of feel like that. And I let the moss kind of be the pops of color here. She kind of ended up looking like Curly from mouthwashing, but we're just gonna ignore that and say that this is my very unique design. I do really like the almost sea urchin spikes of anger and intensity behind her head, and I like how the mask, which could be kind of the quote-unquote pretty part of this design, it looks so parasitic when it's wrapped around her head with these creepy flesh tendrils. That's something I kind of like about how it turned out. Here is our patience demon. I hope you guys like my take. Let me know if you could come up with another way to approach patience as a demon or a monster, because it was really hard at first. If there's any other approach, I would love to hear it. Gruel check. Here's my gruel. So I've never actually had gruel before this moment. Shout out to my new favorite website, goodcookery.com or goodcookery.com, for teaching me how to make this. This is basically just barley cooked in almond milk and sugar and salt. Apparently medieval chefs used almond milk all the time, which really surprised me because I thought almond milk was probably no older than the Tamagotchi, but I was very incorrect. Apparently the dairy milk, actual cow milk, it was too hard to get fresh, and obviously they didn't have good refrigeration, so even if you got fresh milk, it didn't last long enough to use as an ingredient a lot of the time. So they used almond milk, which it honestly got pretty creamy and rich, which I didn't expect. I've never made homemade almond milk before. It was very messy, but it's pretty good, I gotta say. Well, that was our gruel intermission. It's time to talk about temperance. So temperance is the virtue corresponding roughly to gluttony. That's why I ate the gruel. To me, eating gruel is kind of the opposite of feasting on decadent foods. Anyway, temperance is the virtue of self-control, basically. It is kind of like a sibling to chastity, I think, because it's about not doing what you want, moderating the pleasures of life, not eating too much decadent food, not wearing too fancy of clothes, not enjoying yourself too much. The 7 virtues are very Catholic vibes, as you've probably picked up on, but this particular virtue also really makes me think of Protestants. It makes me think of Kellogg and his belief that if you eat bland foods, you won't have lewd thoughts. He really thought you could make a chastity belt of bran and whole grain. The monstrous part of temperance, I think, is really about limiting yourself too much. I wanted to make a monster with no color, no spice, no flavor, emaciated because they only consume flavorless, low-nutrient foods. It's all about stopping yourself, so I kind of tried to make her look bound up, like she's too obsessed with limitation and won't be a friend to herself. I honestly do think that temperance can be an overrated virtue. There are many things that are pleasant or fun or delicious that are also good for you, and many things that aren't pleasant or are really bland that actually aren't good for you. There's nothing inherently morally good about avoiding things that make you happy. You gotta look at each of the joys in your life with like a nuanced perspective and see if they really cause you harm or not. That being said, this was definitely the hardest one, harder than patience or any of the others to make monstrous, because it really is the virtue of moderation. It's not even necessarily saying that you have to avoid all the things that make life grand. It's just about not getting too caught up in those things, and I do think that's generally a good idea. I also drew her with a tipped over wine glass because temperance sometimes refers to or referred to not drinking alcohol. So she's kind of like dumping it out, and her whole body is just a skeleton. She's kind of wasted away, and she's sewn up her mouth because she doesn't want to be tempted towards delicious foods, but you can see that her appetite still exists. It hovers over her in the ruffles of her little bonnet. You can see all these nasty mouths that are, I guess, attached to her brain somehow. She looks the most cartoony in her monstrousness, but honestly, I'm kind of fond of her. I also wanted her to look not too colorful. Again, you know, this resistance to things that are too beautiful or too nice. I wanted her to look sort of like washed out and beige, and I drew lots and lots of ties all over her, like kind of representing the limitations, the stopping of yourself. And I think that she honestly looks pretty cute, despite the fact that her whole lower body is a skeleton. But here is our little temperance character. Again, if you have any name ideas, please let me know and I'll put them in the next character design video. So here are our first 4 of 7 virtues turned monstrous. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for waiting through that long hiatus. I have been working really hard on my graphic novel, and I'm sure YouTube's not happy with me because I haven't posted in so long. Thank you so much if you are here, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you to my wonderful members and patrons, including Stefan, Stavo the Gremlin, Roger Baker, Artist James, Esme and Riley, Mr. Bingley, Glubby Wubby, Arugi, Meow 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 Meow, Sea Nerd, Bowl of Soup, Lorena, Mimi Mamori, Frog Scourge, Zachary Smith, Pale Star Poppy, Shaimani, Celery Sticks, The Mousy Mouse, Zora Eyes, Burnt Toast with Bleach, Sopapia, Hicho, TTT Rex, Lonely Purple Zealot, Jessica Honey Kitten, Loro, Data, Gashes to Gashes, Skitten, Gold Pikachu, Donut Oat, John Steele, Names Are Gone, Crow Dotus, Sunday Good Enough, Ace Wander, Jordy Plays, Clan of Clubs, Sunshine, River the Goblin, Raz Tarosh, Casey, Graveyard Moss, Grexius, Kingdom Hearts Sucks, The Midwestern Menace, CB, Lucy Amajiki, Ravenscrow, Zocelot, Jabber Dabber Doo, Light Jewel, Kadaria, The Expressive Poker Face, Tsubaki, Cutie Pie, Ice Cream Pal, Cola, JJ Jade, and of course, blah 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 blah.